Zach Biles here, hailing from the Northland. Tell us a bit about yourself, Zach.
Yeah, like you said, my name's Zach, and I am a IT professional. I do wear a lot of different hats, and I've worked a lot of different places. But anything kind of technology related, I'm interested in it. You name it, networking, servers, desktops, video games, DIY projects, home automation, sensors, that kind of stuff, a lot of wireless. Um, and yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of my background. I own a managed service provider business, helping small businesses do, networks and servers for their, running their operations, and um, also do some development, programming, a lot of Python as well. So, like I said, a lot of different hats, and that was kind of a laundry list of stuff. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things I have here is, I guess the topic or agenda today is network attached storage for filmmakers. So this, let's say we got like a hypothetical guy here who may or may not be me. Uh, has an ISP.
asking for a friend, right?
Yeah, asking for a friend. Yeah,
Yeah,
has an ISP router, one of those modem combo things, probably from AT&T. Sorry, T-Mobile. Um, Wants to go to network storage. Uses both and uses DaVinci Resolve. So I have a few questions here, and I think you've seen these. So I guess basically would be it's like, hey, I edit. I want to get my network set up for some basic NAS stuff. Like, where do I start? You know?
sure. So yeah, there's a pretty wide gamut of kind of storage options when you're talking, either network attached or even direct attached storage. You can go anything from a just an external hard drive. That's, I think, where most people start. Plug in over USB right to your workstation or your laptop, and work on your files there. All the way up to having a big unit ra in a rack with 20 hard drives in it, and attached to a 10 gig network. So um, we can kind of talk through a little bit of the progression of some of those things, because that's what I think most people go through is, like I said, they start with that hard drive, right? They run out of space on the hard drive. You can't, now I've got two hard drives. Now I've got three hard drives, and I got to carry them with me everywhere I go because I don't have enough storage on my laptop to record and edit and do all these things, and all the time spent transferring things back and forth. Um, you can get into a little bit of the details around, hard drives versus solid state drives and some of that kind of stuff. Obviously hard drives, usually a lower cost. You can get higher density, so more storage, in a single drive at the cost of speed. They're slower. They have moving parts. So if you have it in a backpack, there is, if you're familiar with like a record player, you'd have that little read head on the that would go around similar to like a CD or a DVD. And what can happen is if it's in a backpack or something, it gets slammed down, that head can actually come down and contact the platter that the data is written to, and can corrupt your data. It's even worse if it's actually running and you drop it and that happens, because then it can like scratch, a big groove in the platter and ruin a whole chunk of data. So kind of downsides of that, obviously, would be with data loss or data corruption, but it's a lot lower cost. SSD prices or solid state drives, prices are coming down. Sizes are getting a little bit bigger. You can get 4 and 8 terabyte drives, in the $200 to $300 range, I think. Um, but that would be kind of a step up then, right? You have no moving parts. You don't have to worry about, dropping it as much. Obviously, if you drop it real hard and it breaks, that's an issue, but a little bump here and there is not generally a big deal. So once you've kind of outgrown, we'll call it the external hard drive stage, that's when people start looking at things like QNAP, Synology, um, to name kind of the common ones that people start to look at. Drobo is another one. And basically, those just come with generally like a Thunderbolt port or a USB-C where you can start to do 10 and 40 gig connections to your storage. They come in anything from a 2-bay device to something, 12 bays, meaning you can put 12 drives in it. And then you get into the conversation of RAID. How do you want your redundancy set up? Basically, RAID is just a software layer on top of the hard drives that will write data across the various drives to either provide redundancy or speed or some combination of the two. Um, so without going in a ultra technical lesson about RAID, but you've got like RAID 1 through 10, there are kind of the levels. You start with one, which is mirroring. So if you have two drives, anything that's written to drive one also gets written to drive two. So if you lose one drive, all your data is copied to the second drive. Or sorry, RAID 0, my bad. RAID 1 is striping, so that then gives you speed. So it writes the data across the two drives, not necessarily linearly, but it's using both drives to read and write from at the same time so that you get more speed at the cost of redundancy. You have no redundancy if you only have two drives in a striped setup. Once you start moving into like RAID 5, RAID 6 through RAID 10, you need multiple drives. You're talking 5+ drives. And then it's doing a combination of mirroring and striping across all the drives, as well as parity in order to rebuild. Say, like you lose a drive, it can rebuild your data from the parity bits that are stored on the other hard drives that are still functional. So as you start to get into direct attach and network attached storage, that's where you start to have to decide, am I more concerned with speed or redundancy? Or do I need some combination of both? And the RAID 5 through 10 um, give you different variations of those two things. Um, so yeah, you can get into, like a Drobo or a QNAP direct attach. You're not going to connect it over the network. Some, pros and cons there is you have the faster speed of being able to have multiple drives, potential redundancy, at the cost of mobility. Because now this is a big thing that sits on your desk, size of almost a small suitcase in some, instances where, you're not going to be putting it in your backpack and bringing it with you. You have a full power supply that goes along with it, and it's pulling, 100 watts of power, and not something you're going to be using on an airplane or in a hotel room or anything like that. So you can get that faster speed, and if you're only ever working on your stuff at home and it's just you, works, really well for a lot of people. If you do have to take something with you to work on the road, download it before you go, put it on your local machine, take it with you, upload it when you get back. Um, you also don't have any like backup really then either if you do like, okay, I took it off the NAS or DAS, I suppose at that point. Um, I got on the airplane, my laptop got lost in my luggage, whatever work I completed is gone, and I still have the copy from when I copied it off before I left, but whatever work you've done, up to that point, it's lost. So those, but again, you're talking, okay, now this is just one step above just an external hard drive. You're kind of moving up. Once you start having multiple people that need access to files and you want to be able to access things remotely. You want it to just always stay on your NAS and not have to, copy things back and forth. That's when you start getting into the network attached storage because then, your storage has an IP address. You can connect to it, virtually from anywhere. And there's all kinds of, I guess, considerations that go along with that. Anything you want to kind of interject or ask or
Sh- sh-
clarify before I kind of
sure.
switch gears?
So theoretically, this guy, he's still on Sorry. So before we get to like specific vendors or stuff, he's still on that modem, right? Is there
Hmm.
anything he has to do prerequisites before he can start adding some network attached storage
Sure. So,
infrastructure?
basic network setup. Um, Honestly, you can start right with your ISP modem. There's
Mm-hmm.
no requirement necessarily as long as you have an available port
Mm-hmm.
to plug the Ethernet jack into,
Mm-hmm.
your ISP modem or router. Um, once you actually do go to a NAS system and you can start like if you have an old desktop computer that has hard drive slots, you can start from there or purchase, pre-made systems.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no real specific network requirements other than just an available port that you can then talk to from your laptop or desktop.
So, assuming that this, maybe I'm jumping a little bit too far ahead. Okay. Um, so I guess the question it becomes is bandwidth. So most these days, most people are shooting at 1080 to 4K.
Hmm.
Obviously there's some workarounds bandwidth, but like how much bandwidth would you need to pull? Uh, let's say like I had like wanted to create the intro to the Brady Bunch and add maybe four 1080p streams coming through or something like that. Um,
Sure. Are you talking, you're talking actually just editing
right
that
off of
editing
it.
footage and
Yeah,
putting things together?
yeah.
Yeah, if you want to do that over the network, you'd likely want a 10 gig connection. You
Okay.
could probably go get by with a 1 gig connection, which
Mhm.
is 1 gigabit, which is what most routers and home ISP provided devices are going to have those 1 gigabit ports. Um, if you may experience some latency, loading times as the your editor is pulling information over the network.
Mhm.
Some of it kind of depends on how many other things you have going on the network at the same time.
Yeah.
If it's just you and your modem and your NAS,
Mhm.
um, chances are you'd probably be okay with what you've got.
Mhm.
As soon as you start to add multiple people,
Mhm.
that's when you're going to start seeing more pull on the network because if you're both editing 4K streams and doing, a lot of different interactions with the data, the other thing you have to keep in mind is it's not just network bandwidth, but drive or NAS bandwidth, like the actual speed that it can read and write data from the hard drives.
Mhm.
So that's when you start to get into the conversation again of within the NAS. Now, do you have hard drives or solid state drives? Hard drives generally slower. They have a spinning, they have moving parts, a spinning disk inside, and they have to. So the way a hard drive works is it has to access the data in a like, linear fashion. So as that platter's spinning, it's having to wait. It reads a bit. It has to wait till that revolves all the way around to read the next bit. So there's a max limit of how fast it can spin, and you can have drives starting at like 5,200 RPMs. Those are kind of the generally the cheaper consumer grade drives, all the way up to like enterprise drives that spin at 15,000 revolutions a minute. So
Mhm.
that can drastically impact your read and write speeds to your NAS, and that also it plays effect with your just an external hard drive. If you have a 5,200 RPM drive, it's a lot slower than a 15,000 RPM drive.
Yeah.
Give or take three times.
Yeah.
Um, so, same thing holds true with the solid state drives. They're going to be much faster. Whether it's SATA or SAS, that's another piece too when you're looking at either purchasing a NAS or building a NAS. Um, are you going to be putting, solid state drives in it, hard drives in it, the drive size? Solid state drives are generally 2.5 inch drives. Hard drives are most of the time they're 3.5 inch. Usually there's adapter brackets, and so you can kind of interchange them somewhat, but some things to kind of keep in mind if you're not buying a pre-built, fully pre-built system. You can go, like I said, starting from just an old desktop computer you have lying around, put some hard drives in it, install some software. Now you have a NAS,
Mm-hmm.
all the way to, you just buy something off of Amazon or, whatever, and it comes with the drives and everything already pre-installed. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously your cost goes up as you add more, somebody else is doing the work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for most people, if you don't have a lot of technical experience, I think it's a good idea to just buy something pre-made because you know it's going to work. It's going to have support on it. So then
Yeah.
the only trouble you should really have is how are you interacting with it and learning how to just get connected.
Mm-hmm.
You're not sitting and troubleshooting, well, did this install properly, or do I have to tweak a driver for something, or well, I can't get it to load at all. How do I do this? And
Yeah.
so if you don't have that kind of technical background, usually buying something pre-built is going to be a better route to go just to get you to the point where you have a functional system. So if there's a problem, it's got to be with how you're interacting with the system or, an incompatibility with a piece of software, your video editing software or what have you.
Yeah. So speaking of like less technical, um, if someone, obviously is obviously technical enough to maybe set one of these up, but like, would it be better for someone who's less technical to do like one of these machines in a DAS setup, but maybe still benefit from some of the backup features? If you get what I'm saying?
So yeah,
Yeah.
there are some units out there that have the ability to do either or.
Okay.
So some of the commercial systems like the Synology, QNAP type systems
Mhm.
have they'll have like a Thunderbolt port or USB-C port on them as well as a NIC.
Yeah.
And in those instances, you can start using it as a just direct attached storage to your machine
Mhm.
and then move to a NAS later.
Mhm.
So that's also kind of a good route for people where, well, I know I'm probably going to need to get to a point of having a NAS at some point because I need multiple people or remote access to it,
Mhm.
but I'm not ready to take on all that technical stuff right now.
Yeah.
And you can kind of, it may cost a little more upfront, but then pay off later when you don't have to completely replace the system to add, network functionality to it.
Uh, yeah. That makes sense. So yeah. So we've gone on speed about speed here. Um. Multiple editors, all that stuff.
Oh, I
So.
guess one other thing on speed is 2.5 gig
Mhm.
is becoming a little bit more popular as well
Yeah.
and is quite a bit cheaper than 10 gigabit.
Yeah.
So that's also a nice option to look for in a NAS is if you can get something that has a 2.5 gig network port on it, even if you don't have a 2.5 gig switch or router right now,
Mhm.
it will downlink to the fastest available. So the router and the NAS will negotiate what the fastest speed they can both do.
Mhm.
So if that's a gigabit, they'll know, it'll negotiate to a gigabit. If you upgrade your router later to a 2.5 gig router, then you'll be able to realize that speed. And 2.5 gigabit switches are fairly cost effective, under $200. If you don't care about, anything fancy, just I need to be able to connect
Yeah.
at that speed. You can add that behind your router, connect that to your router, then connect your workstation and your NAS to the switch, and give you additional, ports, but then also the speed benefit. And so that's kind of a good intermediary. It's a fairly good standard in the tech industry is the 2.5 gig.
Is there any speed difference between a managed and unmanaged switch, or?
Speed difference, no. So what
Mhm.
unmanaged means you're only going to be able to work with a single network.
Mhm.
If you go to a managed switch, that's when you can start talking about VLANs, separating things on your network.
Mhm.
It's a good thing to do from a security perspective.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not the only person on your network. If you have family members, friends, whoever, coming over, connecting to your network, you don't know where their devices have been, what type of, environments or how their tech hygiene is, if
Mhm.
if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
Um, you don't want something getting onto your NAS from, hey, your buddy brought his laptop over to play some games or whatever, and
Hmm.
he had picked up some malware somewhere and now it's transmitted to your NAS and encrypted all your data. So
Yeah,
being able to VLAN things is good, but it doesn't have any impact on speed or bandwidth or anything like that.
that's fair. So one of the questions a friend of mine had was obviously you said that you could connect to remotely, but how would you theoretically connect to remotely?
So now you get into another realm of security.
Yeah.
There's been people in the past who have gone and connected their NASs and they do port forwarding through their router, so they have direct connectivity from anywhere. While that is technically possible, I would never ever advise anybody ever do that
Hmm.
because not only can you connect to it from anywhere, anybody can connect to it from anywhere. And
Yeah.
if you don't know what you're doing, that's a great backdoor for somebody getting in that you don't want in your
Hmm.
NAS. Um, so a better way to go is to use some kind of VPN technology, and there's a laundry list of different vendors out there that do. You have WireGuard, you have Tailscale, Zero Tier, NetBird. You have self-hosted options, you have commercially available options.
Hmm.
Um, One that or a couple that I've had really good success with that are pretty straightforward are NetBird and Zero Tier. They both
Hmm.
have like free tiers, so you can start out with a handful of devices, and you can log in and restrict
Hmm.
what can connect to what. And most NAS systems also have some kind of operating system on that. So we haven't really got into that yet, but the operating system of the NAS is kind of what controls what runs on it. How do you present your storage? What type of connections are allowed?
Hmm.
Are you using NFS? Are you using iSCSI, SMB, or Samba? Um, most most of the NAS systems have the ability to run containers.
Hmm.
So like Docker containers, if you're familiar with Docker. And that's where you can run a VPN software right on the NAS itself, which then can give you remote access without having to port forward anything through your firewall. So depending on and that can also get around like so if I think you mentioned on a T-Mobile home internet box,
Hmm.
those don't have a public IP address.
Yeah.
So there is no way to connect directly into it from the outside world, which on one hand is a good thing because that means nobody else is going to be connecting to it, but that also means that you can't connect to it, right?
Hmm.
So the VPNs like the NetBird or Zero Tier or Tailscale, what they do is so if you have a container with that software running on your NAS,
Hmm.
it will connect out to one of their servers and
Hmm.
establish and hold that connection open
Yeah.
so that when you take your laptop and connect, it will also connect to that same server and then connect your two devices together.
Gotcha.
So you don't have to have a public IP address on your router in order to port forward your VPN through.
Hmm.
It will most like consumer routers will allow anything outbound. There's no real restrictions on what you can initiate outbound to the internet from your, computer on your home network.
Yeah.
It's more just keeping things from coming in. So the NAS or the container running on the NAS will actually establish that connection out to the internet, which then your laptop can find and then they can talk together. So some things to keep in mind with that is especially if you're looking at editing video or transferring video, is all the speed is going to be limited by both ends of the connection.
Hmm.
So your home internet connection and whatever network you're on, if you're traveling in a hotel or whatever, so your upload download speed on both ends is going to be where your bottleneck is. So if you have say you were at a remote office and you were connecting back to your house, you have a gigabit internet at your office and you have 100 meg internet at your house,
Hmm.
you're only ever going to be able to and that's if it was symmetrical, so your upload and download are both the same,
Hmm.
you'd only ever be able to transmit 100 megs a second
Hmm.
to your NAS because your home side is the bottleneck.
Yeah.
So what where you have to keep that especially in mind is when your upload and download speed do not match is usually you have a lot higher download speed than you do upload speed. So, if you have 100 megabits download at home and 10 megabits upload, and you have 100 megabits download at your hotel
Hmm.
and 10 megabits upload at your hotel, or even if it was 100 and 100 at the hotel, you're only going to be able to download from your NAS. So if you're going to pull a file from your NAS to your laptop, you're only going to get it at 10 megabits per second
Yeah.
because the upload speed of your home network is
Hmm.
10 megabits per second. So it can only send to you. That gets a little confusing for some people because they're like,
Hmm.
well, no, I'm downloading. Well, the other side, your home side is uploading, and that's
Hmm.
where your limit is.
Hmm.
So
So,
working on 4K streams and stuff like that over the internet isn't going to be feasible for most people, unless you have a gigabit connection, which some people do.
hmm,
But even then, the reliability of like that speed across the internet and depending on where you are is going to
yeah.
change drastically because how many different internet providers your connection has to jump through to get from wherever you are to your home ISP. There's a whole mess of factors
Yeah.
that can impact that. So
Yeah, you wouldn't be able. I mean, the Premiere Pro definitely would. You couldn't edit in real time off that. Yeah, that makes
no.
sense. Okay. That makes sense. So we don't multiple editors. So what about like automatic backups on the NAS? So part of that, there's a 3-2-1 or whatever. Or
Yeah. So the it's three copies in at least two different places for every one piece of data is kind of I don't know if I call it the industry standard. So what a lot of people do is so you'll have like say your first copy is your whatever you have on your workstation.
hmm.
I just recorded this footage. It's on my workstation. Now I'm going to put it on my NAS. Okay, now I have it in two different places. But chances are your laptop and your NAS are both at home. So now
Yeah.
you're still in one location. So usually what you want to do is you want to get that somewhere off location.
Hmm.
And there's a whole host of ways to do that. The most common, I think, is to um, use some kind of S3 compatible storage
Hmm.
to back up your NAS because it's low cost, it's cloud storage. You can have it replicated between different regions, so you can have like East Coast, West Coast, different data centers. Um, it's generally low cost, especially if it's just a backup and you're not needing to like retrieve from it often. Um, Backblaze is a really good one. They
Yeah.
charge, per gigabyte or whatever. I don't remember, like 10 cents a gigabyte
It's pretty
or
reasonable.
something like that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of times costs to retrieve it, but like I said, if it's literally just hey, my house started on fire and took out my NAS and my laptop,
Hmm.
at least I could go get it. It's going to cost me a little bit of money, but I can get my data. Um, AWS S3 obviously is the other kind of, very common one. There's a trying to remember, there's one other one. I want to say Kiwi, but it's not. Um, Wasabi maybe. I think
Sounds.
Wasabi is another one that's fairly low cost.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's gonna be a little bit of a monthly charge to that, but it's kind of up to you how critical is that data. If it were to be lost, what impact would that have? The other option is the lower tech way and just, hey, whatever really critical things I need, I'm gonna write to a separate external hard drive
Hmm.
and go keep it in a safe box at the bank.
Yeah.
It's a little more rigmarole for whoever has to remember to do that backup and go get it, back it up, bring it back.
Yeah.
But hey, it's probably lower cost than having that monthly recurring fee or store it at a buddy's house or a parent's house or somewhere just that's not your house so that you
Hmm.
don't have everything all in one place. So if it were to flood or whatever happens, you've got a copy of that data. So
Hmm.
the nice thing about the S3 type backup is, or you can have a whole separate NAS. We can get into that conversation a little bit. If you want to have two NASs, you can actually replicate between them. So you could have one at your house, one at your parents' house, and just have everything constantly sync
Hmm.
so that, hey, I lost the one at my house. Well, I'll just go grab the one from my parents' house. I'm right back to where I was.
Hmm.
I'll have to replace my NAS, but then I can set that up then as the backup, with the new one and just reconnect the synchronization.
Hmm.
It's going to take some time to, copy the initial backup, but then if it's synchronizing in real time, it's generally pretty fast because it's just copying little chunks of stuff that are being modified. So that can work real similar to the S3 without that monthly cost also. So yeah, you can, all kinds of different
Pay up front,
options, but
basically. Yeah.
yeah,
And you'd be I don't know if you get this reference, but Arthur Tunaz Jackson.
I don't think
Okay,
so.
never mind. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so basically, you went over a little bit about port forwarding and the cons of that, but other just basic security considerations at all, or?
Yeah, I mean, again, kind of depends on what else you do with your home network.
Hmm.
If you have a lot of friends and stuff that come over, just people, at your place using your network, the VLAN's a really good thing. Potentially even something like an actual firewall to
Hmm.
replace your ISP router if you can.
Hmm.
Depending on the ISP, some let you, some don't. There's, all kinds of weirdness with that, but um, there's open source firewalls, OpenSense, pfSense, those kinds of things that you can get started with for little to no cost. Use old hardware that you have lying around or can pick up, cheap on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist. Just an ability to start to segment your network and say, okay, well, anybody that comes over and is a guest in my home, they're going to be on a separate network.
Hmm.
It can't talk to the network that my NAS and my workstation are on.
Hmm.
You can get into things like content filtering. I want to make sure that they're not doing anything illegal on my network or connecting to malware sites. You can do content filtering on something like a pfSense or OpenSense,
Hmm.
just to provide kind of another layer of protection. They have, depending on which one you use, they have like real-time feeds of like bad IP addresses and stuff that it can automatically update in the firewall real
Wow.
time or on a every hour, every day.
Hmm.
It can download that list of like, hey, we know these IP addresses are known to have been associated with some kind of bad actor, whether that's malware or hacking, whatever type of activity it was. It can download those lists automatically and keep you better protected on a real-time basis
Hmm.
versus having to go in and like manually, oh, I know this is a bad one. I'm gonna go put this one in. I'm gonna go put this one in, rely on you to manually go change a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and what that does is it not only protects you from things coming in from the internet, which your ISP router is already doing. It's not going to allow anything by default to come into your network.
Hmm.
What the content filtering does is it also protects you from things that you've initiated,
Hmm.
whether intentionally or unintentionally.
Hmm.
You get a suspicious email and you click on a link in the email.
Hmm.
If that happens to be on one of those block lists, it's not going to let if it's your phone, your laptop, whatever, it's not going to let that connect to the bad server.
Gotcha.
So, like I talked about earlier, your ISP modem is going to basically allow anything out to the internet. So if you're initiating the connection outbound to the internet to some server,
Hmm.
it's going to be allowed by your ISP modem.
Yeah.
If you have an actual, they call them like next generation firewalls, like it's doing like inspection of the traffic.
Hmm.
It's going to see, hey, that device is trying to connect outbound to a bad server. I know that's a bad server. I'm going to block that and protect that device. So that's the advantage of kind of if you start to move down the road of like segmenting your network and having an actual like firewall versus just a router modem combo from your ISP. It's not always, and this is just kind of the way that technology is going, is it's not as often that somebody's trying to like hack into your network.
Yeah.
You're, you know, jo Joe Smith has nothing of value to a hacker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's maybe got a little money in the bank or he's got a house, but like the value versus time correlation just isn't there for most hackers. They're going to say, okay, it's going to take me a week to get into this guy's network and he's got $500 in the bank. Like that's not worth it to me. I'm going to go after a corporation or whatever. But if I can get him an email and get him to click on a link, it's wide open, right? If
Yeah.
if I have an ISP modem, like it's just going to go. And now I've compromised his workstation and installed some kind of remote access software
Mm-hmm.
based on the link that he clicked. Now I have a foothold in his network and I can get in anytime I want. And
Mm-hmm.
that connection can just stay open indefinitely because there's nothing in that modem that's going to block it.
No.
So that's the advantage of moving to something like an actual firewall that has that logic in it that can say, hey, I know this is bad or this looks suspicious. I'm going to shut that down and, not allow that to connect outbound because I know it's going somewhere that I know is bad.
Yeah. Makes sense. I think you've gone over this a little bit, but so you got um, obviously QNAP and Synology and all that stuff. The pre-made NASs. I think we actually have both here. Well, we have a big old Synology and we got like some like super micro or whatever thing.
Mhm.
What's the advantage? Obviously, can you make a high performance NAS at a lower dollar amount if you're DIYing, or is it pretty comparable or
Honestly, it kind of comes down to more of what kind of hardware you have laying around and can
yeah,
reuse, and is it going to meet your performance needs?
gotcha.
A lot of times it's, oh, well, we're bound by the network, so I need to upgrade my network. Maybe I'm going from 2.5 gig to 10 gig.
Hmm.
I can buy a 10 gig networking card for my existing NAS and just upgrade that piece of it.
Yeah,
But at some point, you're going to then hit the performance limit of the drives or how you have them configured.
yeah.
Um, and so like there's kind of a couple different factors there.
Hmm.
Um, Generally building it yourself, um, you have to factor in your time. Like how much is your time worth, and is that really what you want to be doing? I might be able to save a few bucks by buying, some old used enterprise hardware
Yeah.
on eBay or something, but what's your trade-off? If you buy a pre-built system like in Synology or QNAP,
Hmm.
it's going to come with support. If you have problems, a hard drive fails, usually there's a 12-month warranty or whatever. So like, you're not then having to pay out again because, oh, I bought this on eBay. Now I just have to go buy another one because there's no
Hmm.
warranty on it.
Yeah.
Oh, the main board on my QNAP failed. I'm going to call QNAP and they're going to, send me a new unit or whatever. So
Hmm.
there's, there's pros and cons. I would say with NASs, if unless you are like really interested in learning how they work,
Hmm.
I would kind of stay away from building one because it's similar to building a PC just with extra hard drives,
Hmm.
but the software is not um it's not generally like an operating system like your Windows computer or your Mac computer.
No.
A lot of times you're going to be in the CLI or command line type stuff
Hmm.
and digging around on forums to find answers or some obscure little command to run to do some action.
Yeah.
Um, so unless you're really interested in like learning the guts of it, I would kind of shy people away from building their own. You can save some cost by something like TrueNAS.
Hmm.
Um, you can, if you have an existing system that has a bunch of drives in it, you can install the software on top of it,
Hmm.
and they have an open source version. So then, there's no cost for the software side of things. Has pretty much all the same features as like a Synology or a QNAP would have, but you're not paying for like the software on top of the hardware. And there's a vendor called IX Systems that builds like TrueNAS systems, and you can come preloaded with the software and everything.
Hmm.
Um, so that's a good option for people if you want to try to save a little bit of cost, but you have a little bit of experience, so you can kind of, you've got that staged
Yeah.
approach again. You can go completely DIY, build it yourself, all the
Hmm.
way to just, buying that pre-made system.
Gotcha. Yeah. that makes a bit of sense. It's a case by case kind of
Yep.
know yourself kind of thing. Um, Let me think here real quick. We went connected properly. I don't know if this is something you know, but did they ever figure out that issue with the QNAPs with the security, or is that still an ongoing thing? Or
I know I've seen a couple of different things regarding the QNAPs. I
yeah,
don't know the exact status without looking it up, but that is one um it is another consideration. A lot of those like the QNAPs and Synologies, they have I'll call them helpful features that they connect to some remote server to do support, or they automatically give you like a tunnel to get in remotely, through their software.
yeah,
um, Anytime you have proprietary things like that, there's opportunities or higher opportunity, in my opinion, for exploits to happen
yeah,
because it's a black box, right? You're only going to have the eyes of the employees of that company looking for security issues.
yeah,
There are security researchers out there that will, they'll try to test, commercial software as well. I tend to be more of a fan of open source
yeah,
because you have thousands of people, not only the people who bought a system and are just using you say a Synology
yeah,
or QNAP, and I don't mean to pick on anyone in particular, but
yeah,
um, whatever developers they currently have on staff are generally the only people looking at that stuff, and they're the ones that see the code. Well, if you have something like TrueNAS, which is open source, not only do you have the developers of the software, you have community members, people using it in all kinds of weird, wonky ways. To me, tends to lead to a more secure product. That's just kind of my opinion of, like proprietary versus open.
yeah,
Um, yeah, open source, the attackers can also see the source code and find bugs and stuff, but like there's just so many more eyes
yeah,
on things and different points of view and looking at things in different ways or different use cases where, like proprietary, yes, you control every piece of it and you created this little black box, but as soon as somebody gets a peek inside that black box, now you're stuck trying to fix it, and it's always like a game of whack-a-mole with the bad guys because there's always going to be bad guys.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Anything else you want to cover? Because I feel like we covered a lot of ground here.
No, I mean, I'm obviously, I will say I'm a little more of a security-minded person.
Mhm.
It's just based on my professional history and
Yeah.
everything. So I get a little passionate about it. Full of knowledge and willing to share more on like more security
Yeah.
specifics if you ever want, but
Yeah. We could totally
I
do that.
try not to get into too much of that because everybody want or all the security community is very kind of doom and gloom a lot of times, like
Mhm.
when you really start to pick things apart, there's no way to protect yourself. Like it just basically you assume that you're going to get breached or
Mhm.
infected at some point.
Mhm.
The question is more just, okay, what do I do to recover, or how do I limit that blast radius of if something gets on my network, how far can it transmit? Do I become like a repeater for that
Yeah.
to infect other
Yeah.
people?
Factor. Yeah.
Things travel. Um, so it's not likely, but there are certain measures you should take to protect yourself. Obviously, like we said, don't ever expose your NAS directly to the internet, things like that. But again, when you kind of come down to it, it's like everything's going to get hacked at some point. So, that it's kind of use what you like, use what works for you, and put basic security measures in place. Don't leave everything wide open. Have file permissions set up and a log into your NAS. Don't just leave the default credentials. Always change those. But for a home user or very small kind of deployment like that, it's not worth the extra layers of complexity because like the security, I call it the scale. It's a balance between convenience and security. So
Mm-hmm.
the higher level of security you have, two-factor authentication, you have firewall rules on, you can only connect on these specific ports, and as that ratchets up, your usability and your convenience level is gonna plummet. So like you got to kind of find what balance works for you and how critical is my data? Is my data worth anything to anybody, even if they were to get in? Like is it data that I'm storing for a customer of mine? If I'm a business, do I have credit card numbers? Do I have, customer contact information? Do I have uh, any kind of like intellectual property that I'm kind of tasked with, even if it's not officially, if you're storing somebody's video footage, it's usually implied that you're doing something to, kind of protect that footage. And, if it's somebody, even if it's like a wedding video, well, that could be very private to some people and they wouldn't want that, getting out. So having at least some basic, level of protection in place, but do you need the, enterprise level, all kinds of crazy stuff? No,
Mm-hmm.
it's not worth the time. It's not worth the headache that it's going to be to you, the user, to implement all of that and live with it day to day. Um, but yeah, just finding that balance of what works for you. And, some of that comes with the type of work you're doing, what you're storing on your NAS, how critical is it? Is it any kind of sensitive type of information or intellectual property? So,
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that would actually be kind of interesting at some point. I mean, obviously scope for this one, but like to go over some basic, let's say, home security stuff,
mhm.
whatever you. But yeah, I think I've run out of questions. So yeah, obviously you have a business. Is there anywhere to find you online if people? Oh, where are you located actually?
I'm on the Iron Range, so
Irons, yeah.
like Mountain Iron area.
Yeah. Do you got like a web presence or?
I do a little bit. Maybe I'll give like my GitHub. It's Bile0026.
Okay.
I've got a lot of like different open source projects and stuff on there. I usually share most of what I build for stuff that I do at home. I am on Twitter. I think it's Biles on Twitter.
Okay.
Don't really do a whole lot there, but yeah, if you Google me, there's only a couple options
Gotcha.
that come up, so it's pretty easy to find me.
Gotcha. That makes sense. All right. Well, thank you a lot, man.
Absolutely.